Good morning, everyone. My name is Kirby. I want to start by telling you a little bit about myself. So I study international affairs and Arabic, and I have a self-designed major in sustainable development. I chose this topic today on regenerative agriculture because I am interested in sustainable agriculture mechanisms in the Middle East and North Africa region, and my honors thesis will be focused on this. So the regenerative agriculture solution in the Project Drawdown book is in the food and agriculture and land use sector. This sector will sequester 204 to 273 gigatons of CO2 by 2050. And it's also an important sector because agriculture and forestry generates 24% of total greenhouse gases worldwide. So the solutions in this sector have three main avenues. Those are to address waste in diets, so reducing food waste, eating lower on the food chain, i.e. more plants and less animals. But then also it's about protecting ecosystems. So this is deliberate protection of forests in order to protect the carbon that's in them. And it also deals with agriculture practices such as regenerative agriculture. So I made this diagram to show the relationships in regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture is the umbrella term, and then these other specific types fall under that. So there's regenerative grazing, which we talked about in class, raising animals and animal byproducts, things like that. And then there's what's called regenerative annual cropping. This is with crops, fruits, vegetables, and it basically takes conservation agriculture techniques to another level. So to very briefly explain conservation agriculture, basically it uses techniques such as cover cropping, crop rotation, and minimal tilling in order to make the land and soil more resilient to drought and erosion. And it also has the added benefit of strengthening plant roots. So now I'm going to explain regenerative annual cropping. This technique will sequester 14 to 22 gigatons of CO2 by 2050, and it has the potential to store 25 to 60 tons of carbon per acre of farmland. It's estimated that by 2050 there will be 221 to 231 million hectares of regenerative annual cropping. And what separates this from conservation agriculture is the use of compost, green manure, and organic production. In order for it to be a regenerative production, it has to be organic and cannot use any pesticides or fertilizers. So now I want to get into some of the examples that I have for you guys. I see myself as a storyteller, and I believe in the importance of sharing stories from all around the world, especially when they have to do with something as important as climate change and sustainability. So today, I kind of have a past, present, future type of presentation with these examples. So the first one I'm going to start with is this sustainable farm in Costa Rica called Finca La Flor. I visited it when I was in Costa Rica in spring of 2020, and it inspired me to learn more about food systems and the injustices that can occur within them. So to start, this farm only uses organic agriculture in order to grow their crops, and they also use cover cropping techniques, which means that they're using techniques that are part of regenerative agriculture. They also try to minimize the amount of water that they use and recycle water from multiple parts of the farm. In a true closed-loop fashion, nothing goes to waste on this farm. They make their compost via two systems, a traditional worm compost and a heat compost. Worm composts are more sensitive to the materials that are put in it, so they mainly use this with the goat manure from the farm, and it takes about 2 months for this manure to be completely decomposed by the worms and turned into soil that can be used with the crops. The second process that they use is a heat compost. And this system is more complicated and it's a more delicate process, but more things can be composted in a heat compost system. As I've mentioned, there are goats on the farm and there are also chickens, and they use regenerative grazing techniques for the goats and chickens. So Finca La Flor was my past, but now, here in my present in Bowling Green, is to learn about sustainable agriculture mechanisms here at home. This brings us to a local farm, River Cottage Farm, where they practice regenerative grazing. I had the opportunity to meet Miss Debbie Apple and Greg Braun on their farm on Tuesday afternoon. And I had some pretty amazing experiences learning how regenerative grazing works. They have about 400 animals that they move daily or every other day, and 2 separate farms. The animals include chickens, sheep, pigs, and cows. I was lucky enough to join them as they moved cattle from one pasture to another pasture across the farm. This was quite the experience because we had to round up probably about 70 cattle and their newborn calves, literally born that morning, and get them to move from the top of the farm, the very edge of the farm, to the other edge of the farm. There were some very stubborn calves and some very protective mamas as we were trying to get them to move from the top of the farm to all the way down to the bottom. So on their farm, they had a lot of forested area that was really inaccessible to them. They couldn't walk through it at all because of all of the grown-up invasive species. So they decided to try it with pigs because pigs will eat anything. And so they decided to try and put the pigs out there and see what magic they could work. So this photo shows what the grow-up looked like before they put the pigs out there. This was the very first time the pigs were out in that area. So as you can see, there's a lot of grown-up plants where no animals, cattle can really use that land for shade area or anything like that. So once they put the pigs in there, as you can see, the pigs just eat everything. So the pigs will go and they'll eat all of that low woody type of grass and bush area until it's basically looks like it's a tilled garden. And then they move them from this space to another space, and the pigs get to work, and then they go and they chop down any invasive species or trees that aren't doing well in order to help the other trees thrive in that environment. And the pigs absolutely love it. They had about 8 large pigs when I was there, and then they had 15 or so piglets that had just been born. So the next example that I have for you is taking a more international scope. So we've done the past, present. This is what I'm looking forward to in my future. I'm doing my honors undergraduate thesis on sustainable agriculture mechanisms in Morocco. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about someone who will be featured in my thesis work. This is Abdullah Badhira. He's a 3rd-generation Moroccan farmer who started transitioning his family farm to regenerative agriculture in 2012. His farm was a tomato farm. That's all they ever grew was tomatoes, but due to recurring drought and desertification, and also not having enough water in the water table, Abdullah decided that he needed to make a change, and that's when he learned about regenerative agriculture. Through using regenerative agriculture techniques, Abdullah has been able to restore the soil on his farm, and he's also creating a niche market for organic products in Morocco. So what are the big takeaways with this? Well, regenerative annual cropping is one of the most effective solutions in the land use sector because it is very cost effective with a lifetime net profit of $135 to $206 billion. We have to eat, we need food, and so we have to produce that food sustainably. Additionally, this solution does not require more land. It simply requires using the land differently. It is more work on the farmers, but the reward is so worth it. It's not only about building a relationship with the land and with the animals, but it's also about rebuilding and reconnecting the relationships between animals and plants on the land. Debbie and Greg both say that they're not animal farmers. They don't raise animals. They are grass and soil farmers. That is what they raise. Thank you so much, and I really hope that you enjoyed this and learned something about regenerative agriculture.